Good morrow, scholars. Welcome to the Five Nights at Freddy's The Twisted Ones, a look back. Now, that's the cover, back cover. If I'm not mistaken, this is Nightmare Freddy. And I'm fairly certain I've shown you guys the little poster that comes with it, with this all moldy, misshapen Freddy that I don't like because the bumps just. What's that one phobia where you got like a fear of like holes in places where they shouldn't be? I don't know. It's kind of like I have that feeling when you see those. Anyway, so I made a little list of things I thought were worth discussing in our little look back on this series, and I hope you'll agree. And who knows? Maybe we might accidentally discover some sort of secret clue to unravel what exactly it all means. You know what I mean? I don't. Anyway, let's see. First on our agenda is going to be, I feel anyway, the most appropriate is Charlie's lack of empathy and her lack of any real human connections to another living being. She goes from being like really caring and compassionate in the first book, mostly because everything that happened to her, to in this book completely alienating herself from everybody. We get a little glimpse of when it started with her fight with her Aunt Jen, I'm sure you remember. And I remember the first time I read that particular passage and how surprised I was, because even in the book, Charlie in Universe describes it as being very strange that they would have such a fight. You know what I mean? And that was my first real, like, I can't think of the word. Inclination, and no, that's not quite right. But that was my first real glimpse into the character she was becoming. There was a little bit with John and how she was getting exasperated with him not keeping up with her when it came to a subject he had no idea about, her robotics class. And even with Clay, half the time it seemed like she wasn't really connecting with him at an emotional level. It was purely not even logical. I don't want to say mechanical almost. You know what I mean? And we see that go from her fight with her Aunt Jen, stuff with John, Clay, her friend Jessica, because even before the start of the book, she just assumes that Jessica will let her move in, and I would never ever assume anything like that. I feel bad just knocking on the door on game nights with my friends. Like, I don't want to be a distraction. But anyway, her character changed an awful lot, and I can understand, PTSD, everything that they went through, it's going to affect you, but I feel like she was affected, and she was dealing with it in the most unhealthy way, and everyone just kind of placated her because of everything she went through, all the way from that to back with her father and her brother, but we'll get more into that later. Then there's the murders. I remember reading the passages about them when they first discovered the bodies. And the first thing I thought of was her father and how he died. And as I read this book and, went back and went over some of the stuff that happened in the previous book, I'm starting to think he didn't actually kill himself. it was just staged to look that way. Because the description of the machine that killed him resembles, at least passingly, what happens to these people when they get killed by these new spring lock animatronics. But they're not really true spring locks, you know? So I don't know if that's true or not. Don't take that as like gospel truth or anything. That's just my takeaway from all that. But it makes a lot of sense when you think about it. I mean, so does him having killed himself, considering everything that happened prior to that particular instance. But I feel like it holds a lot of weight. Let me know your guys' thoughts. And speaking of all these animatronics, did you guys happen to notice? I know I did, mostly because I've read the book twice, but even the first time around, the descriptions of her robots, and then us coming to the animatronics that um, Afton made, that they find, they had way too many similarities for me the first time around, and the second time especially. And I'm starting to wonder if there's some kind of unspoken connection between her and Afton that we don't know about yet. I mean, obviously there is, because, killing her twin, but I think there's something more than that. And I'm afraid to find out. Do we know her last name? I just thought about that. If someone happens to remember if it says in the previous book, or if it said somewhere here and I've just forgotten, be sure to let me know down in the comments. Because again, I really feel like there's too much of a connection between the way she designed her robots, using her father's technology, mind you, and making them turn out to be more like Afton's later creations, depending on what time or where they fall on the timeline, because they might have been older. Well, I mean, technically they would have been older because present, but you know what I mean. And speaking about Afton's technology, how do you guys feel about this disc and it being able to distort how you see the animatronics? I'm almost willing to accept it, just because my brain gets scrambled enough as it is. I'm kind of scrambled right now. I can't really remember what I was going to say about anything. I'm just kind of lucky that I'm stumbling through and it's working out pretty well. But yeah, I really feel like it's leading too far away from science fiction and almost becoming science fantasy. Kind of like Star Wars does in some ways, if you know what I mean. And then there's this new location which has the same ability with the lights that they had. And all these new animatronics that we've never seen or heard about before, which is okay with me. To give you an example, my friend Miga, I've had a few videos with him on the channel previously. He really hates the Transformers movies, like a lot, like almost pathological hatred for them. And I'm confused as to why, because they aren't bad enough to warrant it. But anyway, one of his biggest complaints, I remember, was every time that there was a new movie, they would have a whole bunch of new Transformers. And I'm like, that's the point of the Transformers toy line. It's so that you can get the toys. And of course there would be more. They come from an entire planet of them. And it's kind of the same here. Of course there would be more animatronics than we knew about before, because these guys, especially Afton, had been spending years building them. And my biggest thing about the location wasn't so much that it came up out of nowhere. It was really just that they went so far away and then somehow ended up all the way back at Charlie's house. So, how big was this location, or how far away was it from there? Is that why she wasn't allowed in the woods? Do you remember? She mentions it in this book, I think, but it was especially prevalent in the previous book. Her father warned her repeatedly not to go into the woods behind their house, even though it was only like a few trees deep. There might have been a secret entrance over there that we don't know about. Again, this is just supposition. I won't say one way or the other if it is or not, but let me know what you guys think. It makes a lot of sense. Kind of like how in Batman Begins, when that young Bruce is playing, and then he falls through the covering to, I think it was an abandoned well, I can't remember, but he falls in through the hole and lands into what will become the Batcave. It's kind of like that. Her father's trying to prevent her from falling into something and then activating an animatronic that he knows is down there. Uh, but yeah, I think those were there because he couldn't destroy them for some reason, but he knew what they were, and so he had to bury them. Which, if he did know what they were and Afton found out, it would explain why he ended up dead. But again, supposition on my part. Let me know what you guys think. I can't think too much else on what the animatronics are. I like that there's almost always a Freddy. I'm a little confused about all the other ones. I would like to see more. Like the brown jackrabbit. Was that actually a different animatronic, or was it Springtrap the whole time? I can't really remember now. I hope you guys will be able to help me remember. But the biggest thing about that location and the animatronics is just the similarities that they had to Five Nights at Freddy's sister location. I'm sure you guys noticed that Freddy and that wolf creature and the other one, they all resembled Baby in their design. If you remember, Baby stands much bigger than Freddy ever did because it's meant to house an entire body in its midsection. You know, if you remember from the little mini game in Sister Location where you lure the child in and then poof, and eat it, that's essentially what they did here. They just didn't have any grabbing mechanisms. They just swallowed them whole. So I think a lot of these animatronics are going to be, end up being like prototypes or precursors to what will become Baby from Sister Location. Obviously, Baby will have been made by this point in the timeline because Dave's already dead. Well, Afton. And we know he was alive when she was first brought online. So we'll have to wait and see where the timeline fits everything. But I think it's safe to say that that's the right interpretation there in regards to that. And speaking of Sister Location, so much as I was, with the balloon boys and all the little things following her, moving faster than she could follow, don't they remind you of like the little diddly bops, or whatever they were called, in the mini Rinas from Sister Location? I remember reading those lines about them, and that was my first thought. I didn't really picture them as balloon boys. And just the idea that there's more than one. I mean, we knew there was more than one because of the glitches, and then they were made canon and everything. But yeah, there are just too many similarities to Sister Location for it to not be an accident. And that makes me wonder, is this location just more to the compound where they were made? Or is it something else? Are there completely different locations and way more than we ever thought? I'm afraid to find out. I'm honestly though, since this one gets destroyed, I'm willing to bet that there's sister location is completely separate from this place. But it would not surprise me if it turns out that they are, in fact, different levels to the same complex, which makes you wonder, how did they get it there? Anyway, so a couple things before we go. Springtrap and his line about how he didn't take Sammy, he took her. What do you suppose that means? I know, me personally, I think, and I thought that from her initial nightmare where she can hear Sammy and she's locked behind, or he's locked behind something and she can't get to him. I interpreted it as her misinterpreting her dream, because I do that often, and she was actually the one trapped inside something, and she couldn't get out to get to Sammy, and something killed him rather than captured her. I'm thinking one of the Springlock suits went off, but because she was small enough, maybe it didn't kill her. And so he had to kill Sammy the old-fashioned way. Uh, if that's what happened. But with that last line and the other person showing up that looks just like Charlie, wearing combat boots, I think. Well, black boots at the very least. I'm starting to think she didn't have a twin brother, but it was actually a twin sister, and she just couldn't remember. You know what I mean? I don't know. That's kind of reaching for something to be different, and it could just be me and my interpretation of it. I'd love to know your guys' thoughts. But yeah, I really feel like it was actually a twin sister the whole time. Or maybe it's like that one horror movie, is it like Sleepaway Camp or something, where we see a shot of twins, their brother and sister. They're playing in a lake, and one of them gets hit in the head by a speedboat and dies. And we're led to believe that it was the twin brother who gets killed. And spoiler alert, it was actually the sister who dies. And the parents were so distraught over losing their daughter that they forced their son to pretend to be a girl for the rest of his life. And she comes back to the lake because there's a camp and starts killing people. And anyway, oh my goodness. So I'm thinking it could have been something along those lines too, but that's a little too much for something in Scott's repertoire. You know what I mean? But I think something similar might be going on right here. Let me know if you guys think it has any sort of leg to stand on. Again, I'm not going to be like Matt Pat and say, like, my thoughts, my interpretation's 100% correct, everyone else has to agree with me or they're wrong. I'm just putting out my thoughts, and I want some feedback about how you guys feel about it. Whether or not it's viable for the storyline, we'll have to wait and see. But I think until we get a reveal, anyone's theories on what happened is as valid as any others. Except for the whole Dave's a Time Lord thing. Let's stay away from, stuff like that. But yeah, other than that, I didn't expect this video to go on as long as it did. But I'm kind of glad it did. Gives us a little bit more we can talk about. Because again, I want to hear your responses. Well, read them. I apologize. Because I love interacting with you guys, and I feel really bad that I went so long without being able to upload anything. And I'm sorry that I can't really explain it any more than that. So, again, please feel free to share your thoughts. Let me know your list of all the things you found that reference the games. If you found something, even if it's just one thing more than what I realized, you'll win a special prize as soon as we find out what it was. That nail is still in my door. Anyway, until next time. Goodbye, everybody. Ooh, man, I'm going to need to get some water. I'm tired.